Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.
So members, good afternoon. You're very welcome to the Executive Office Committee meeting this afternoon. We'll begin with item 1, which is apologies, and at this stage we haven't received any apologies, so we'll hopefully have a full complement of people as the meeting progresses. Item 2 is Chairman's business. Maybe just to update and remind members that on the 25th of August we wrote a joint letter with the Constitution, Europe, External Affairs and Culture Committee of the Scottish Parliament and the Legislation, Justice and Constitution Committee of the Welsh Parliament. And that letter went to Lord Connell, who is chair of the Lords European Union Committee. And we were asking for assurances that the devolved legislators would be included in the Parliamentary Partnership Assembly. And the committee considered a response at its meeting on the 22nd of September. So the chairs of the devolved committees are now seeking a meeting with Lord Connell to secure a more concrete assurances of the participation of devolved legislators in that PPA. So that's just a bit of information to update members on. This morning there was a joint committee meeting between ourselves and the Department of Committee of Justice with the President of the Victims Payment Board, Mr Justice McAlinden. The meeting was attended by representatives from both of our committees. We got an update from the President of the Victims Payment Board on the work that they have carried out to date, and also clarified some of the issues and concerns that both of our committees have had in terms of who is responsible for the decision making, who is responsible for any changes that there might be to that board and the work that they do. And I know that some members had asked questions in the House as well, so both committees were able to get a very full update this morning from Justice McAlinden, and anybody that was present at that meeting was generally happy with the information that we had received. Members, the Truth Recovery Design Panel reported on the mother and baby homes issue, and that was launched yesterday. They made a series of recommendations, one of which was that there should be a public inquiry into the matter to try and find some redress for those that were in those institutions and affected by those institutions. I'm going to suggest to members that we invite the panel to come to us and give us a presentation on their findings. Also, maybe a suggestion that we write to the Executive Office and ask them, have they appointed somebody at this stage to head up that piece of work of developing the recommendations that has been made. And that's a very important matter for quite a number of people in the north and wider afield who were resident in those institutions and who feel that some form of redress is critical. So I would suggest that we invite the panel along and that we get an opportunity to hear of their work. Would that be agreeable?
Agreed, yeah.
Okay. I'm conscious that we just have a series of notes that people cannot hear us. Just two members that are presently on that are not able to hear us, so I can offer them no advice because they can't hear us, so hopefully they will get sorted out. But we're still with Pat and Alex, and hopefully Christopher are still hearing us okay. Can I confirm that with Pat and Alex?
Yes, I can hear
okay.
perfectly well.
Okay, so we have... Okay, so that's still 6 of us, which means that we're still quorate. Okay. Members, it's timely that later we will be receiving a presentation from the Victims and Survivors Commission because I want to respond to remarks that were made by the Minister of State, Conor Burns, this morning, who said that the British government are willing to listen to alternative proposals to their disgraceful command paper, which they published back in July on the legacy issue. Now, the fact that the Minister would say that we have not exactly greeted these proposals warmly, I think only emphasises the disdain with which the Tory government continue to show to us. And it also just shows us how detached they are. Essentially, he wants there to be some sort of consensus among the parties here and that they would be willing to listen to that. Well, Stormont House Agreement took a considerable amount of time to prepare. I think that it would be fair to say that whilst not all parties signed up to that there's a good 95% of that the parties can agree to, and yet there's not a single party that agrees with the proposals that have come from the Tory government. So my recommendation to Conor Burns is that he wipes the dust off the Stormont House Agreement document that he has in his office, gives it a good read, and then comes back to us and has a conversation at that stage. But hopefully we'll be able to flesh out some of those whenever we have the conversation with the Victims and Survivors Commission after.
Chair,
Yeah, come on ahead there, Pat.
could I just those views? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Also, I heard this morning that the Grand Opera House will reopen again tonight, and I know that pantomime season doesn't start for another month or two, but we were certainly treated to a little bit of a preview last week from the junior ministers on their presentation about the flags report. Now, during the course of that, Junior Minister Middleton said that if we're all on the same page, I am happy to suggest that the report be published within the next week. So we're here a week later. I have not seen any report being published, so I can only assume that the Executive are not on the same page about this, or that its contents are so earth-shattering that they need to withhold it. But this is turning into a bit of a farce. I think that the public are recognising that. I think the public are able to make their determinations from the report last week as to where they think the blockages are or are not. But I think it's fair to say that along with the public, my patients are certainly worn out with this, but we do have the First and Deputy First Minister presenting to us next week. So we'll maybe give an extension of 7 days to that suggestion last week, and hopefully we'll be able to see next week if that report will eventually be published or get some explanation for that.
Chair,
Chair, can I come up?
Okay, can I go Trevor in the room, then Christopher, then Pat? So, Trevor?
Chair, I'm interested to hear that comment from the Junior Minister. It actually contradicts what his own boss says, the First Minister, who answered questions recently and didn't give any kind of timescale. In fact, there was a stonewall approach to it. I'm glad they're coming next week. We can maybe ask them directly, but you know, a week to say it was going to be published within a week sounds quite ridiculous, you know, in the circumstances.
Okay, we can go to Christopher online.
Would be ridiculous if that is what Gary Middleton had said. Actually, it's not. He said that if there was agreement, they could be published within a week. It's therefore evident there's not agreement. So I don't really know what the purpose of publishing a report that there's no executive office agreement about, what that would actually achieve. Because if it's not agreed in the executive office, if it's not agreed between the two parties that occupy that office, then it's dead in the water. So there's really no point in publishing a report that's not going to be enacted. And I think what Gary Middleton was saying last week, in fact, it's clear what he was saying last week, was if there was agreement, it would be published. I think the inference is clear enough in terms of what the actual state of play is at the present time.
Okay, thank you, Christopher. We'll go to Pat.
Thank you, Chair. I would have to say I tend to disagree with your portrayal of the evidence last week as being like a pantomime. I thought it was quite refreshing in terms of the honesty and transparency that came out, particularly from Junior Minister Kearney. And we have been saying here now for a number of months that the blockage is not the Executive Office, the blockage is the DUP. And I think we have to be absolutely crystal clear about that. The DUP are the party responsible for holding up this report, no one else. And I know it fits into the narrative of some other parties that they want to handcuff Sinn Féin and the DUP together. This particular blockage is the responsibility of the DUP. Sinn Féin.
Thank you for that, Pat. Well, as has been said, we'll hopefully get that clarified next week whenever the First and Deputy First Minister are here. They are both in charge of the department. Let's hope that they're able to clarify, because that was certainly a clear perspective from Sinn Féin last week, but wasn't shared by the DUP. So that will give us certainly a line of investigation for next week to get clarity on this for the public. We'll move on to item 4, which is matters arising. On the 29th of September, the committee agreed to hear evidence from stakeholders from the travel industry to hear about their experiences with the travel agents' coronavirus financial assistance scheme. Maybe just to remind members that the majority of the financial assistance that was provided to many sectors as a result of coronavirus went via the Department for Economy and the Department of Finance, but this one issue for the travel agents came via the Executive Office, so therefore it is something that we have a direct connection to. On page 14 of the meeting pack, there is a list of potential stakeholders that are from the travel industry who have been in contact with us, and I am going to make the suggestion that we meet with them, the stakeholders that are listed, and that we do it similar to the, if members will remember, we discussed the High Street Task Force where we had a number of people that presented to us for a number of minutes each, and then we were able to ask questions at the end of the process. I think it's fair enough to say that the travel agents are facing a fairly unique impact as a result of COVID, and that they were given recognition of their unique status because of the Executive Office's response by setting up a scheme for them, and that therefore if we listen to a stakeholder group just to find out how they're getting on and if they have any further requirements, and that may be something that we're able to make representations to the Executive Office for. It's So are members happy enough with the list of stakeholders, or is there any others that they feel should be on that list?
Chair, it looks a bit tight for time, the whole thing, and I notice there's 4 different individual travel agents there. Maybe they could combine their presentation in some way and jointly, and give us 10 minutes instead of 20, and it would leave a bit more time for questions, and also a bit more time perhaps for ABTA and the association.
For each, so yeah, okay.
Okay, I suppose the point he's making is there's some of them, I know some of them maybe look like they're individual, but they maybe have a dozen or more outlets, whereas some of the headquarter bodies maybe only have a dozen that are part of them, so they may look like they're one, but I think the point you're making as well, that if we could try and aggregate some of the smaller to come together so that we aren't pushed for time, is maybe what...
Well, there's at least 3 of them there. I know we're countrywide travel agent, that's fine, but anyway, I'm not anticipating what they're going to say, but they may well all be making the same points because they have the same difficulties. Okay.
I think the point you're making is about maximising the opportunity to ask questions as opposed to being dealing with requests. So if we could take that on board, that would be very useful. Okay, members, then maybe just to double check at this stage before we move to the next item, how maybe Emma and John are getting on. Can you hear us there, Emma, John?
Yes, Chair, I can hear you. Although it keeps kicking me out twice now, saying I have to update my Windows and reinstall Windows 10. God knows how long that'll take. So fingers crossed it keeps going again.
Okay, perfect.
I have to come in on another device, but I've got use fully now, so I won't be able to use the chat function.
Okay.
But I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, and probably not the raise hand function either, Emma, so we'll call you in separately then if we need to check you for questions and things. I'm just going to clarify as well, under the minutes, can I just check if we could get the minutes approved? Anybody were happy enough to approve the minutes from last week?
I wasn't here, Chair.
Okay. Nobody's...
Happy to approve it, Chair.
Okay, that's grand. Okay. So we move on then to item 5, which is the Commission for Victims and Survivors. It's an oral briefing. Members, there is information on pages 16 to 78 of the meeting pack, and I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome to the meeting Dr. Andrew Sloan, who is the Chief Executive of the Commission, to Dr. Katy Radford, who is the Acting Head of Research and Policy, and to Mary Moreland, who is a member of the Victim and Survivors Forum. You're very welcome to today's meeting. The meeting, as ever, has been recorded by Hansard, and that we are being broadcast live at the moment, just to update you on that. Thank you very much for your attendance here today. What we will just do as normal is maybe to pass over to yourselves to give us a bit of an update on where you are and how you're getting on with things, and then afterwards we will open up then for some questioning from the members. If you're happy enough with that, I could pass over maybe to yourself, Andrew, to begin.
No problem. Hopefully you can hear me okay?
Yes, indeed, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to present to the committee this afternoon. I'm Andrew Sloan, Chief Executive at the Commission for Victims and Survivors. And as you said, I'm accompanied today by Mary Moreland, a member of the Forum, and Dr. Katy Radford, who is our Head of Research and Policy Development. The Commission last gave evidence to the committee in March 2020. At that committee meeting, the former Commissioner, Judith Thompson, and members of the Forum addressed the committee on issues relating to legacy, Peace 4 research, and the Troubles Permanent Disablement Payment Scheme. You will be aware that since Judith's tenure ended in August 2020, the Commission has continued to operate in the absence of a Commissioner. This has placed various limitations on our functions. Without a Commissioner, we have been unable to fulfil our legislative duties and independent function of providing advice to government. We have also been unable to replenish the membership of the Victims and Survivors Forum, meaning that the workload and responsibilities placed on our current members has been much greater. I would like to welcome the current advertisement of the Commissioner's post and look forward to the outcome of that process. I would also like to take a moment to thank and acknowledge colleagues within the Executive Office, Victims Unit, Commission staff and members of the Forum who have shown great commitment to furthering the work in the interests of victims and survivors and in contributing towards greater reconciliation and societal healing despite such challenging circumstances. In particular, I would like for the committee to join me in recognising that the forum members invest their time and energy in this work on a wholly voluntary basis. To set some context around the ongoing relevance of conflict impact and why victims and survivors issues must remain a priority, in August this year, the Commission carried out a population survey asking the general population in Northern Ireland a series of questions on issues affecting victims and survivors. I provided the committee clerk with a copy of our summary findings, which I hope has been circulated. The results of this survey found that 24% of our adult population met the legal definition of a victim or survivor of the Troubles, as outlined in the 2006 order. Issues around the definition aside, from a social perspective, that is at least 320,000 adults in Northern Ireland who have been affected in some way by the violence here. Following the Northern Ireland Office's 2018 public consultation on legacy proposals, the Commission submitted advice to the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. This advice was underpinned by key guiding principles developed by the Forum. It outlined a clear view that any mechanisms must first and foremost meet the needs of victims and survivors, seek to promote reconciliation, and importantly, must uphold the rule of law. The committee will be aware that in January 2020, New Decade New Approach reaffirmed commitment to establishing the Stormont House Agreement legacy institutions. In the period leading to the publication of Her Majesty's Command Paper in July 2021, the UK government signalled a change in direction for legacy mechanisms. It also outlined the intention to bring current and future civil cases, judicial reviews and inquest proceedings on trouble-related activities to an end. The premise of these proposals seemed to be centred around the idea that the current system is not working for anybody, and that Northern Ireland's past significantly impacts on politics, public debate and trust in the police and wider justice system. I think it is accepted that the current system is not working for the majority of people. However, we should recognise that civil proceedings, judicial reviews and inquests have delivered much for some families, and that the institutions proposed in Stormont House have never been implemented nor given the chance to work. The Command Paper has been met with considerable opposition from victims and survivors, political parties within the executive, and prominent voices within academia and civic society. In the recent population survey, 88% believe it is important to address the legacy of the conflict, yet in the same poll, 70% stated they did not support the Statute of Limitations or an unequivocal, broad, unconditional amnesty as it has recently been described by legal experts in Queen's University that would apply to all Troubles-related incidents. The Commission, Forum and many other victims and survivors organisations have shared with the UK Government the triggering and distressing human impact on the mental health and emotional well-being of those affected by such proposals. It is disappointing that this is not enough to influence the direction of travel. To this end, the Commission and Forum have met with both members of the US Ad Hoc Committee for the Protection of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement and the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the promotion and protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms while countering terrorism. In recent weeks, we have seen that members of the US Congress have written to the UK Prime Minister calling for the government to reconsider its legacy proposals. Both the Commission and its Forum fully recognise that victims and survivors are a diverse group of people, often with a range of views and unmet needs on legacy matters. And although support for the Stormont House institutions was always nuanced, it remains the Commission and Forum's position that these measures offer the best chance of delivering optimal outcomes for victims and survivors and wider society when it comes to addressing the past. We feel the closure of avenues as proposed in this latest Command Paper represents a sweeping denial of the rights of families and presents a real risk of seriously damaging our focus on reconciliation. This sentiment was broadly supported in the population survey, with between 55 and 67% of the respondents saying that they were in favour of establishing the legacy bodies proposed in the Stormont House Agreement. Despite these micro and macro challenges, the Commission has continued to develop a number of key strategic pieces of work across the organisation. In looking to the future, we are in the process of developing a new government strategy for victims and survivors alongside our co-design partners in the Executive Office, the Victims and Survivors Service and community-based service delivery bodies. To date, this has been informed by our policy information paper provided to the Executive Office, our research over the years, and most recently the interim findings of the 4 Peace 4 funded research projects due for completion by the end of the year, and by sectoral experiences provided by community-based organisations and the lived experience of the Victims and Survivors Forum. Unlike the previous strategy that was lacking in target setting or performance measurement, in the development of a new victim strategy, we are mindful of adopting an accountability-based approach to the work done across the sector, and we would seek the committee's support in considering this and feeding back to ministers when the draft is received. It is clear that the impacts of our past can very much be felt in the present. Education, housing and often even sport experience a high degree of segregation, and whilst great work is being done across departments looking to integrate and reconcile these areas, countless other social and political developments can amplify pre-existing tensions that go right to the heart of identity and culture. There are issues that remain difficult to address despite the passage of time since the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, but a better future relies on a cross-sectoral and coalesced approach to dealing with our social challenges across health, education, community planning and economic development. In short, lasting peace is a cornerstone to the effective delivery of key outcomes within the programme for government. It is our ask today that government apply a victims lens across governmental policy areas, just as rural proofing saw a government commitment to reviewing and examining all public policy to ensure that they do not disadvantage rural areas. We seek the committee's support in considering a similar approach for victims and survivors, to take account of the circumstances and needs of a population in which a quarter have been affected by the Troubles. This would ensure that the same individuals and families would have their views considered in areas overlapping conflict legacy and learning about the Troubles, including education, health, community planning, sport, arts and tourism. It is worth mentioning and recognising that of the 24% of people meeting the legal definition of a victim, many will choose not to self-identify as a victim, the reasons of which are varied. Some find the public debate of victims' issues to be harmful at a personal and societal level. Others were previously unaware that they met the legal definition until it was presented to them. And others still do not wish to be labelled or put in a box based on a particular experience in their life. To date, much of the work within what is known as the victim sector has centred around truth, justice, health and well-being, and it is vital that this work continues in these areas. But there is a piece of the puzzle missing, and that is building towards a better future. To our mind, that is the empowerment of victims and survivors in the pursuit of reconciliation and societal healing from a policy perspective. This would not only complement and enhance the work of a new Commissioner and the delivery of a new strategy for victims and survivors, but a coordinated approach can optimise the use of public money by collaborating on areas of overlap. There is a strong overlap between high levels of mental ill health and poverty in areas most impacted by the past. Social isolation of victims and survivors living in rural communities further compounds these experiences. Responses to the population survey revealed that 21% of adults in Northern Ireland said that their mental health has been affected by a conflict-related incident. Of this figure, 44% said that they continue to be affected to the present day. Significant resources to address the mental health legacy of the conflict have gone into providing treatment and support across the health service and funded community partners throughout the lifetime of the current strategy. In 2021, over 2,500 individuals accessed a range of trauma-focused psychological therapies through community-based service providers. Across this critically important line of service delivery, the Victims and Survivors Service have indicated that approximately 60% of service users reported a clinically reliable improvement in their psychological well-being. This is an encouraging outcome, which is potentially life-changing for an individual whose mental health has been negatively impacted by their experience of the Troubles. However, we recognise that further work is required to ensure more victims and their families are accessing treatment and support which achieves an improvement in their psychological well-being. We welcome the recent announcement from the Health Minister on the allocation of $8.7 million in funding to community organisations providing mental health service, and echo his sentiments that too many people in our society struggle with being mentally unwell and find it difficult to access the help and support they need when they need it. Indeed, as the recent population survey indicates, a significant proportion of adults in Northern Ireland continue to live with the psychological consequences of the Troubles. The Commission has been a long-standing advocate for the creation of a dedicated regional trauma network by which regional specialist trauma services could be accessed by victims and survivors of the Troubles. It is regrettable that 6 years after the commitment was made to establish a world-leading mental trauma service for Northern Ireland, that would be a fitting legacy to those who have suffered during the Troubles, it remains uncertain when the service will become operational. We do acknowledge that the delays to this service are in part linked to the considerable pressures upon the health and social care system as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and of some significant concerns raised in connection with the regional trauma network's proposed service delivery model. From a societal point of view, we need to ensure that services are in place to bring people to the greatest degree of well-being possible. It is also crucial that this is considered alongside the outworkings of investigations or truth recovery processes, which can often compound pre-existing trauma. When we speak of the transgenerational impact of the Troubles, it is worth recognising the disparity in educational attainment in areas affected by violence, which directly impacts opportunities later in life, including employabilities. These are issues that impact the work and outcome delivery objectives of other departments, including health, education, finance, economy and infrastructure. Segregated education also remains a barrier to a reconciled society. Despite a recent attitudinal survey committed by the Integrated Education Fund finding that 71% of the Northern Ireland population believes integrated education should be the primary model, only 68% of schools in Northern Ireland hold integrated status, the majority of these being primary schools. Some suggestions made during the field research of our Peace 4 funded transgenerational research project support the view that learning from the past is in the best interest of shaping a better future when questions around education was put to our recent survey respondents. 43% felt learning about Northern Ireland's past should be compulsory across primary and secondary schooling here. Victims and survivors have an important voice to lend to the conversation around integration and the importance of shared learning, whether through formal education or education through arts and tourism. They have a profound and direct experience of how divisions can nurture fear or lack of understanding from those from different backgrounds, experiences, or from different walks of life. Good relations and social change are at the heart of a better future, and we all have a role to play in creating and promoting cultural shifts towards reconciliation. This involves including victims and survivors and shared learning and thinking in areas that may have been previously overlooked. In the context of community planning and development, victims and survivors have much to contribute to conversations around how public spaces can be reimagined to make them more accessible and inclusive to those affected by the past. Through empowering victims and survivors in conversations around the exhibition and display of culturally and historically significant materials such as commemorative events and plaques, memorials, murals, how history is taught in school, or other potential trauma reminders or triggers, we can promote best practice in educating on our past in a way that is not damaging to victims or survivors or the fabric of our society. In doing so, we can begin to reduce the transgenerational transference of trauma. In closing, continually building towards broader reconciliation is in all of our interests. We must be mindful that in healing our past, we are also actively inclusive of other backgrounds, ethnicities and cultures. In promoting Northern Ireland, strategic investment and regeneration are heavily reliant on prolonged and sustainable peace. So too is incentivising our young people to see a worthwhile future with the best standard of living available to them. Learning from those who have direct lived experience of the harm and suffering caused by conflict is key to minimising the risk of a return to violence. We seek the committee's support to advance our work both interdepartmentally and across parties on a number of areas pertinent to victims and survivors, but also to the broader reconciliation of our society. Thank you for your time. If you don't mind, I'll ask Mary and Katy to take a moment to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Andrew. I, as you know, am representing the Victims and Survivors Forum. My husband and I both served in the Ulster Defence Regiment, and he was murdered by the IRA on the 16th of December 1988 as he was going about his day job, leaving me a widow with our 2 young children, then aged 10 and 12. Like all members of the Forum, I am determined that our society does not return to the Troubles. As we approach the end of 2021, we are still debating the legacy institutions. I am sure few would disagree that the Stormont House Agreement institutions were not perfect, but if we continue to wait for perfect, nothing will ever happen. At the minute, they remain the best way forward to meet the varying needs of all victims and survivors, and should be implemented with haste and, of course, resourced properly. Our politicians continue to shy away from dealing with the past. We have been without a commissioner for victims and survivors for over a year now. This is incomparable to any other commissioner-led body and effectively silences the voices of victims and survivors. Those who advocate drawing a line under the Troubles, or it being the best way to help Northern Ireland move further along the road to reconciliation, do not understand that grief and pain are not time-bound. Neither does it reflect the voice of the Forum, or indeed the voice of the majority of the population. Every citizen has the right to have access to the criminal justice system, and to be denied that fundamental right is, in my opinion, immoral. The world is watching. The UK Parliament is synonymous with democracy and has become a model for parliaments around the world. To deny access to the criminal justice system is wrong and an insult to victims and survivors and to society as a whole. Now is the time to act and implement, albeit the imperfect, solutions. It has been said many times before, but there is a real opportunity to stop working in silos, to have a joined-up approach, to change our language from rhetoric to factual, accurate and inclusive language. The effect of doing nothing impacts right across society, across genders and across generations. We all have a responsibility to build a better future, a future that we as a society can be proud of and ensure that those responsible for delivery are held to account. We spoke about strategy, and the previous strategy was lacking in target setting and performance measures. Moving forward, there must be accountability. The Forum, representative of a diverse nature of victims and survivors, does not just look at the past, but looks at it in a context of creating a better future for all. The Forum doesn't use the word closure, but looks at achieving the greatest degree of resolution possible. The Forum is trying to make sure that the conditions that existed to enable conflict to happen are not recreated. Thank you, Katy.
Thank you, Mary. Good afternoon. My name is Katy Radford, and by way of introduction to the Commission's research and policy development work, I'd like to reiterate that the extended team applies a victim-centred and a trauma-informed approach to all of our engagements. We undertake qualitative and quantitative research that, whenever possible, has been co-designed or steered by victims and survivors in 3 key areas: to address the legacy of the past, to advance access at services based on defined need, and to build for a better and shared future. It's not surprising that these 3 areas more than often overlap. And having spent my childhood and adolescence during the 60s and 70s in Belfast, my personal as well as my professional experiences have been profoundly shaped by that period. and now focus on the point at which each of these three areas does intersect. Namely, that intersection can and should, where possible, become a point of resilience building and of post-traumatic growth, to provide our society with the architecture and tools to ensure that future generations do not bear the scars and burdens of the past, but can carry their own culture, identity and heritage with pride and learn to recognise the value and worth of others. Our work in the Commission can be a map for victims and survivors to move forward if they can, and if they can, to then be supported to model a valued and leadership role in enabling society to do the same. I began working with victims and survivors in the year 2000 on the oral history project Bear in Mind for Cran Tree. The title of that work was taken from John Hewitt's poem, An Elegy, Not a Manifesto. The Commission recognised that the arts are both cathartic and educational, and increasingly draws on the work of our many artists, poets and performers to interpret or illustrate the findings of our research. And we do so because it ensures that as wide a range of people as possible can access and respond to the findings of rigorous academic research, which can also then be used to feed into policy development and how our visitors view us, the message we send to others as well as to ourselves. You've had sight of an example of that with the House project, which we undertook with the Northern Ireland Housing Executive and the Big Telly Theatre Company up in Coleraine. And this showcased at Failure and Phobal and Eastside Arts Festivals at the same time. It took research quotations from research undertaken by or on behalf of the Commission and quite literally decorated the walls, furniture and soft furnishings of 2 Northern Ireland Housing Executive properties and enabled visitors to the properties to experience a piece of immersive theatre that dealt with legacy and service delivery needs to address issues such as addiction, education, the transference of family traumas, trust, isolation, mental well-being, and the complexities of juggling competing domestic and gendered expectations. We found that of the 200 visitors to the experience over 4 days, many, though technically victims under the legislation, hadn't engaged with service provision. And building on this work, we will continue our existing partnerships with the Housing Executive and further explore within a shared education framework with Queen's and with St Mary's University College how an augmented reality version could be piloted in schools and teacher training modules. For the Commission research doesn't mean monitoring and evaluation services alone, but rather it's to encourage ethical and hard conversations that create discourse about the issues that Andrew and Mary have both raised. Finally, I'd like to revisit the point made earlier by Andrew and respectfully reinforce that the Executive Office Committee members are in a unique position to play a significant role in taking forward his suggestion from the Commission, namely that as with the Department Race Equality Champions, the establishment of departmental champions will go a considerable way to ensure that those who are most impacted by what is euphemistically referred to as the troubles or conflict remain a priority in policy development and accountability. I'd like to thank the committee for their consideration and look forward to our conversation.
Okay, thank you very much to Andrew and Mary and Katy for their report to the committee. That was plenty of information for us and gives us a breadth of the work that you're undertaking. And we'll move to questions and I suppose a few comments and maybe just highlight the fact that you've mentioned, Andrew, just 24% of the population being impacted in some shape or form or other by what is known as the Troubles is it's a stark figure, it's a big figure, and obviously maybe just if you wanted to give us some comment on that, maybe just that, you know, if there was any other issue that was affecting close to a quarter of the population, there would be an expected resource and an expected response to that. So just maybe, do you want to tell us a bit more about that figure and just what you would think that means that there should be as a result?
Well, that figure equates to, as I said in the presentation, 320,000 people, which is a vast number of people across this small island. And what was stark to me was the percentage of them who had mental health issues and continue to have mental health issues to this day. It's certainly something that needs to be addressed. And as I said, in terms of getting the regional trauma network up and running, I understand it is regrettable that it's 6 years since the RTN was first muted, and I understand from engagements with the Department of Health that officials are working with the stakeholders to advise the Minister. There's issues around how long a pilot phase would last that would be ring-fenced for victims and survivors, and the referral pathways into that service. So just to say that, in terms of some of the other statistics, I'm going to pass over to Katy, who will be able to take you through some of the other figures within the report.
Andrew, thank you. And I think in answer to your question, Chair, one of the things that came out for me about the legal definition is we also asked whether or not people experienced and were affected by the Troubles conflict, and I'll use that expression because it's what we tend to use in the Commission. There was also 51% of respondents said that irrespective of whether or not they were a victim themselves, they had experienced a distant relative, a neighbour, a colleague or a friend who had experienced it, or had been 45% had been present at such an incident. And we can also see that these figures break down in terms of jurisdictions. We've had the opportunity, when we were doing this particular population survey, to look at the experience of people within 5 miles of the border area as well. So and look at things through council areas. So we found, for example, that there was a real difference between those who perceived themselves to be affected by the Troubles, or who were affected by the Troubles, in, for example, Newry and Mourne, which was 34% of respondents, as opposed to Ards and North Down, which were 15%. And so that begs for us the question, why do some people perceive themselves or consider themselves to be victims and survivors, and others choose not to have themselves recognised as such? And we know, for example, from talking with the Veterans Commissioner Danny Kinahan here, talking with service providers in GB and in the Republic of Ireland, that there are a range of different responses that people will have. So as a good researcher will always say, it leads us to need to do more research, and we need that support in order to be able to conduct that.
Okay. Andrew, can I ask you just about the fact that there hasn't been a commissioner for over a year at this stage, and whilst it was very welcome to see the advertisements in the paper last week, you know, that's the beginning of a process, and obviously it's going to require advertisement. There's going to be applications, shortlisting, interviews, appointment, and then eventually somebody taking up the post. That in reality, for such a post, we're probably looking into the new year before that appointment will be taken up. I mean, what have been the day-to-day impact upon the Commission in terms of not having that commissioner? Where you mentioned that the advice to government has been missing, the membership of the forum hasn't been taken up, and legislative duties that haven't been undertaken. But what would be the day-to-day ramifications of those tasks not being able to be carried out?
Well, the day-to-day ramifications is that it leaves the Commission hamstrung in terms of advising government. We can present to government options, we can present to government the pros and cons of each of those options, but we can't actually give advice. That is the remit of a commissioner in terms of what they do. Also, in terms of replenishing the forum, the forum is really a body that provides the Commission and the Commissioner with the lived experience of a victim and survivor. And a new Commissioner coming in may have different ideas about how the forum should be constructed. We currently have an in-person forum, but that could be an electronic forum with a new Commissioner coming in. On a day-to-day basis within the organisation, the Commissioner is essentially the board of the organisation and provides the strategic direction to the organisation. Without that board person in place, and the Commissioner is a corporate sole, one of the few organisations within the public sector that holds that status, it presents real difficulties in terms of knowing what direction that the organisation should be researching in. So, for example, we have a research strategy, but if there was a Commissioner in post, they would have their ideas about the areas and priorities that should be focused on.
And I suppose, Andrew, we have to feel your pain there, insofar as, you know, the research is saying that nearly a quarter of the population are impacted in some shape or form, or are defined as victims, and yet we have an executive office that takes nearly 18 months to appoint a victims commissioner to carry out the work day to day. Those two things are inconsistent. If there's a massive need within our community, we should be responding to that need and responding to it quickly. And it really just doesn't feel on this occasion that is the case. That it's very slow, in fact.
Yeah, well, we would encourage the Executive Office to complete the process as soon as it possibly can and ensure that a new commissioner is appointed as soon as possible. And I do agree with you in terms of the period of time it'll take from the advert going out. I can't see a commissioner being in post for 6 months because by the time they do the shortlisting, interviewing, and then put the selection forward to ministers, and then the person may have to give notice in whatever job they're in. It could take 6 months. So I would certainly be expecting something around the beginning of the new financial year. Okay,
being I suppose cognizant of roles and jobs, etc. Maybe if I could direct the next question maybe to Mary, because I'll appreciate, Andrew, maybe you may not want to comment necessarily on this on the record, but Mary, from the forum perspective, I mean, it feels like the Tory government has just, you know, ripped up a substantial number of years' work that has, you know, painfully been undertaken to try and bring as many of the political parties and communities together in trying to find some sort of resolution for the legacy issue and trying to find the appropriate ways of addressing that. I mean, how do you feel about what has taken place over the summer, and even again today, hearing one of the ministers of state in the Northern Ireland office saying that, you know, they're open to suggestions after what has been a long time and a lot of work. But are you frustrated by that?
I think the forum is frustrated. I think the lack of a commissioner has meant there's a vacuum. We haven't, as Andrew has stated, we haven't had the opportunity to replenish membership, so bring on different voices. And that is, I would say, the priority, to ensure that a commissioner is appointed as soon as possible. It is frustrating that nothing has happened. As I said in my opening address, Stormont House is not perfect. You have 70% from the population survey wanting, or not wanting, rather, the statute of limitations. From the population survey, you have all the institutions, the majority of the population wanting the institutions established. So it is frustration. And yes, it's wrong. I think it was 2019. I mean, Andrew could tell you better, but there was probably about 40 recommendations made, the Commission made, that needed to be considered in a report. You know, but as I say, if you look at the survey, the majority of the population want the institutions established. You spoke about Conor Burns listening to proposals. He's welcome to listen to proposals. I would suggest that I can speak for the forum, and he can come and speak to us at any time, and we will, speak to us, listen to us, because we probably represent the most representative body of the variety of victims and survivors. You know, not all victims and survivors access services. That doesn't mean that they don't want their voices heard. And I think we need politicians, especially the executive, First and Deputy First Minister, need to listen to us, stop the rhetoric, and get on with implementing the proposals. And while imperfect, it is better than nothing.
Okay, Well, Mary, I think there's a clear suggestion there that the Minister of State should come out and meet with you and hear exactly what you as a forum have to say, and I hope that that will be a further example to himself and to the British government that there is more or less consensus here and consensus that their suggestions are not welcome. Andrew, I'm going to ask just two more questions on behalf of John Stewart. John is the Vice Chair and normally goes second with questions, but unfortunately technical problems have bumped him off the system today. And he just wanted to ask if you could detail the practical help that you provide to victims and survivors, and do you feel that the Commission gets buy-in from the full spectrum of victims across the North, or if you think that there are any gaps in the victims groups that don't get buy-in. So if you were able to give us an answer to those, John, would appreciate them.
Well, I suppose in terms of victims and survivors, the groups have about 14 to 15,000 members, and from our survey, we know that that number is probably around 340,000, albeit that many victims and survivors don't want to identify as victims. So in terms of getting buy-in, yes, there is issues around the definition of a victim that we have to work with, but we have to work within that definition. And we do try our best to ensure that all victims and survivors are represented in terms of our engagements and taking views from those victims and survivors and incorporating their opinions into the any policy advice that we would give to government. And as Mary says, the Victims and Survivors Forum is the most representative forum there is of victims and survivors, and that is the primary source of evidence of taking that lived experience and incorporating that within the policy advice that we do give to government.
Okay, thank you for that. Andrew, I'm going to open up now to members, and I have Pat and Alex, Trevor, Podrick, and then we'll check in with Emma. So can I start please with Pat?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to the panel for their presentations today. I want to start out and set clearly on the record that in the view of Sinn Féin, the Stormont House Agreement is the best way forward of dealing with the past. It's a victim-centred approach. As Mary has said, it may not be perfect, but it is the best bet and the best basis for moving forward. And I suppose my starting point is that no victim should be asked to remain silent and forego any rights to truth and justice. And I say that sensitive to the deep loss right across our communities and to recognise the desire for many families to have questions answered. And in my view, if we're serious about dealing with the past and building for the future, there can't be any dilution or erosion of the rights of all victims, not just some victims, of all victims. So I suppose the context for our discussion today is the British government's command paper, its proposals on an amnesty for its own state forces. And in my view, that's a full frontal assault on the Good Friday Agreement. And it's also an affront to families who have lost loved ones during the conflict. And as I say, these proposals are about covering up what their own state forces were involved in during the conflict. The model build team at QUB and CHA, which has already been referenced here today, suggests that in comparison to other amnesties internationally, this proposal from the British government offers the broadest level of impunity of any others they have studied throughout the world. They've described it as Pinochet plus. So I want to ask then, what is the view of the Victims Forum Is the forum in favour of an amnesty and statute of limitations? Are they in favour of ending all legal remedies such as inquests, public inquiries, civil actions, judicial reviews, and so on? So I'll ask that for now, and I'll come back with another supplementary question after that. Thank you.
I'll pass that one over to Pat, or over to Mary, if that's okay, Pat.
Sure.
I could categorically state that the forum is totally opposed to the proposed statute of limitations, the amnesty. From my perspective, as I said at the beginning, I served in the Ulster Defence Regiment, and I'm extremely proud to have served in that regiment. 99.9% of the armed forces served with honour, dignity and integrity. But the statute of limitations doesn't only affect veterans and what has been described as a witch hunt. Should I want an investigation into my husband's murder, because nobody has been convicted for his murder, the proposals effectively denies me that. And as you know, as a veteran and a widow. So the forum believe that, like 70% of the population in the study, that it's wrong, and it shouldn't be implemented. I think it's probably one of the things that Northern Ireland as a society as a whole can agree on, for once.
Okay, thanks for that, Mary, and that's really crystal clear, I suppose. And yeah, the other question I wanted to ask you was in relation to the jointly convened Irish-British legacy process. Can you offer a view on this particular process and whether they believe it's capable of delivering for victims? Thank you.
Is that to me again?
Whoever wants to respond.
Well, I'm not going to offer a view on something I'm not up to speed on, so no, I'll hand it over to either Katy or after.
I'm afraid I'm not up to speed on it, Pat.
Okay.
Did I get the short straw, Pat?
Looks like it, Katy.
Okay, Katy, can you give an answer to that, or are you...
So really, I think, forgive me, I think given that the Commission hasn't got a position on it, it would be unwise for me to do that without first referring to the forum. The forum, as you know, are our first go-to place in terms of what we do comment on publicly. So forgive me, I'm going to stay shut on that.
Okay.
All right.
Fair enough. Thanks for that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Pat. Okay, we'll move on then to Alex, please. Alex Easton for questions.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I'm quite new to the committee, so while I have a vague knowledge of what's been going on, it's quite disappointing to hear about all the delays you've been having in trying to implement things and stuff like that. So you have my sympathy on that. I was quite shocked at some of the stuff that I've heard. Can somebody make a comment on why it's taken the executive so long to appoint a commissioner? That's my first question. Also, could there be comment? I think, Andrew, you mentioned about the trauma services that you're trying to get introduced. What's the issues on those being progressed? Because it's quite shocking to hear that there's 24,000 people who have been impacted by the Troubles, and that's a huge amount of people. And I just feel that those people are being failed, not by you because you're wanting to get this done, but by others from the executive office or wherever, that all these delays are happening. So that worries me. Also, can I ask for a comment on the proposed amnesty that our Prime Minister is doing, which is just totally unacceptable? Would you agree with me that to do that, well, A, it's morally wrong, but B, would just traumatise the victims even more so. That's just unacceptable. And the fourth question is about the education and about the possibility of our young people being taught about the troubles in the past. Anything that we teach our kids, it needs to be the truth, and it needs to be the truth about the troubles. And that it was really just a sordid terrorist war, and we do need to be very careful what our young people are taught, because the truth is absolutely vital if that is to ever progress. So that's just my 4 points, if you could maybe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Easton. If I deal with the first two of those, and if Mary deals with the amnesty one and Katy deals with the education one, I'll go first. Why has it taken so long? The answer is I don't know why it's taken so long. Certainly whenever the Commissioner's term came to an end, the Forum were very quick to get a letter to the First and Deputy First Minister to get the process underway as quickly as possible. That process, well, we can see the outworkings of that. The process, it took over a year before the post was advertised. Now, I do believe that the process had been agreed prior to the summer, but it was decided not to advertise it until the autumn time, until the summer period was out of the way. In terms of the trauma service, we are very keen to see this trauma service up and running, as I've said in the opening remarks. And I did engage with Department of Health officials to find out where we were with it, and they advised me last week that they are still preparing advice for the Minister, and that they would be consulting with, as they described it, consulting with stakeholders about that advice. One of the issues there's sort of two issues in terms of the regional trauma network. One is that it is proposed that it will be a dedicated service for a period of time for victims and survivors. And as I understand it, the legal advice that the Department of Health has received is that health service provision can't be ring-fenced for a section of the population, that it should be open to all. Now, my understanding is that they want to do it as a pilot phase for a period of time that would be wholly available or only available to victims and survivors. The other issue is the referral pathway into it, and getting agreement on who can actually refer into any new regional trauma network. There is a number of groups, a small number of groups, who hold the relevant accreditation to allow them to refer into psychological services, and there's also staff within the Victims and Survivors Service. And it's about getting agreement from the Department of Health that those organisations will be allowed to refer into the regional trauma network. But for us, one of the key issues is that GPs must be allowed to refer into any RTN, quite simply because the vast majority of victims and survivors will be engaging with their GP on a regular basis, especially if they have a psychological need. And we think it's absolutely key to ensure that GPs are able to refer into. When I was speaking to the Department of Health officials, they sort of give a time frame of 6 months before that sort of stakeholder engagement that they refer to would be completed. Okay, I'll pass over to Mary on the amnesty question.
If I could actually ask Alec to repeat the question, because I dropped out for a moment there. My internet must have fell out.
Sorry,
yeah.
Mary.
This amnesty idea from the Prime Minister, what he's proposing, it's just totally unacceptable. And I suppose my question was basically, if that goes ahead, is that not really re-traumatizing victims again by doing that? That some of them might never get the opportunity to bring those to account for their actions?
I think you're probably not far from the truth there. Not every victim wants people brought to court and prosecuted. What most victims and survivors want is the best possible resolution to enable them to move forward and empower them to move forward. And to deny access to a criminal justice system is, in my opinion, and probably in the opinion of forum members, wrong. I don't necessarily, on a personal note, I don't necessarily want to access the criminal justice system, but I don't want that access to be denied. If at a future date new information comes to light, new evidence comes to light, the proposal effectively, as I said, denies me as a veteran and as a widow that right. And I don't think, because, I mean, as I said, the world is watching and it sends the wrong message out. So yeah, it is wrong.
If I just come in there, I think in our engagement with the UN Special Rapporteur, her words were that China and Russia are rubbing their hands with glee when they watch what is going on in the UK in relation to a proposed amnesty in Northern Ireland, because it's something that they have been criticised for many years, and now the UK, who is held out to be one of the best Western democracies, is doing exactly the same thing.
Thank you for those comments, and we have to do everything to try and get a bit of sense in our Prime Minister over these issues. I think it's the next question on education.
I'm
Yes.
going to pass over to Katy on that one.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment. We asked as part of the population survey how 11 different categories were perceived by the respondents in terms of having positive or negative influence, and segregated schooling or separate schooling and housing were the two highest components of that. 70% felt that to have separated schooling systems had a negative influence. And I think what's interesting about the responses to this and other questions is the difference between what those who are in the 18 to 40-year-old categories see as different to those in the 65 plus. And in a lot of our responses, you'll find that those in the 65 plus age range are less concerned about some of the issues and less taxed than those in the younger age range. And this is true of those in terms of both separate schooling and education, but also in terms of informal education too. 67%, the highest set of respondents, were very positive that we needed the oral archive component, which was set out in the Good Friday Storm House Agreement. And for that, essentially what we're going to do is see that oral initiatives and play a very strong part in the education of young people informally, as well as the formal education component. So I think both of those areas are something to keep an eye over. It doesn't necessarily mean that in terms of education, we need to look in the formal schooling sector. I hope that helps a little.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for that then. Okay, if we move on then next, if we could ask Trevor for some questions.
Yes, okay, Chair, thanks very much. Thank you, all of you, for your presentation. I think the work you do is outstanding, and I hope that you've continued success with it.
Thank you.
Andrew, you mentioned a figure of 320,000 people who feel that their mental health has been affected by the Troubles. And that I think it's 44% of those people feel that their mental health continues to be affected. Is that a fair reflection of what you said?
Well, 320,000 people is the number of people who would identify, if we extrapolated our population survey out, who would identify as a victim and survivor given the definition. I think it's 21% say their mental health is affected. I just don't have the exact number, but it'll be around that sort of 275,000 mark, and 44% of them say that their mental health continues to be affected. So,
yeah, I'm looking at the figure you gave there and equating it to the number of people on health service waiting list at the moment, which is pretty much the same number. Is it fair to say that the more successful you are with the work you're doing, the more beneficial effect you could have on the health service waiting lists?
Absolutely. I'm sure there's a direct correlation between the work that we do in the victim sector and our partners in the Victims and Survivors Service will help address the issues that the health service is facing. And it really comes back to that thing about having a joined up governmental approach in terms of how government does its business. One of the key things that I think was missing from the last strategy was that there was no targets in it, and that there was no accountability framework or monitoring framework in it. And I think if we have that sort of joined up approach, we also bring a victim's lens to everything that we do, that we can start to address some of the issues and actually make the public pound go a little further than what it currently is.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. Joined up government is an elusive goal in this place. I don't want to repeat the discussion around the appointment of a commissioner, but I would just say this, that and it wasn't a surprise in August 2020 when Judith Thompson left the position. We knew before that. And the inexcusable aspect of this is the period of time between when we knew Judith's contract wouldn't be renewed and September the 27th this year. It's par for the course of public appointments, as far as I can see, but there's no excuse for it. And I would say this, that by coincidence we're having the First and Deputy First Minister here next week to have a discussion about whatever we care to raise, and you can take it from me that question will be asked directly of them, and see what if I can't speed this up. Because you've already told us how much your work is constrained by the absence of a commissioner. This is a vital service. It's very important. It affects so many people in Northern Ireland, and yet it takes OFM, DFM, maybe 14 or 15 months to actually come up with an advertisement. That's not a question, Andrew. It's just a bit of a rant. I'm sorry about that.
Well, it is fair to say that the Victims Commissioner is the advocate for victims and survivors, and you know, victims and survivors really miss having a commissioner there to advocate on their behalf. And it's not to say that every victim and survivor will agree with the commissioner every time, but a commissioner does give that voice to victims and survivors.
Just say keep up the good work, and thank you for your answers.
Thank you.
Maybe just to update the member on something which may be of interest to what he's just said. Later in the pack, we have requested that we would receive a written report from the Commissioner for Public Appointments, but they haven't appointed a Commissioner of Public Appointments. So if we've got an office that can't appoint a Commissioner for Public Appointments, one has to wonder, is it really a surprise that they haven't been able to appoint a Commissioner for Victims for nearly a year? So I think we're starting to unearth within the department that there are some issues there which we certainly could flag out and flesh out next week. But we'll move on now to Padraig.
Yeah, just before I start, I just want to come on around education. Obviously, as a former teacher, that's something that I have a lot of experience on. Alex's comments I find quite concerning. It's very clear to see that you have no background in education and even less commitment to moving forward. So I do want to flag those up and show my concern around those. Secondly, I think that we're in dangerous territory when we start to suggest that religious education in some way promotes sectarianism. I think that that's a very dangerous avenue to go down. It's one that I have to say is completely unfounded. I know myself from being in schools that there's a huge amount of cross-community education, there's a huge amount of shared education opportunities through PDMU and other projects which really show a real degree of inclusion across the board. So I do think that point needs to be raised and needs to be seen, you know, that you can't just kind of say integrated education is the only way to go. And I suppose by doing so, tar any schools that don't follow the integrated education system. So I would just like to flag that up at this point, and then just to move on to my question. In your request to meet the committee, you state that you're working within the context of a greatly reduced victims and survivors forum. So I'm wondering from that why the forum has been greatly reduced, and how does the impact and the quality of victim and survivor engagement, how's that impacted by that?
When the original forum was appointed, there was I think there was about 25 members on it. Now, over the course of time, that number has depleted. And what we have to remember is that the forum is a group of volunteers, and it's a group of volunteers who are victims and survivors who have to come and relive their victimhood and relive the trauma every time that they come to a meeting, because they're coming to a meeting of the Victims and Survivors Forum. So we have had a number of people who have dropped out of the forum for personal reasons, for a whole variety of different reasons, the same as any other collection of people. When they come together, they stay together for a period of time, and then the numbers start to diminish. When those numbers diminish, it puts greater pressure on the work that the remaining members have to do. In terms of replenishing that forum, if we had had a commissioner in post, if for example Judith Thompson's term had been extended, the forum replenishment exercise would have been completed by this stage, and additional members would have been added to the forum to lift that burden and pressure off them. And I do worry about the pressure on forum members, especially when they do have to come along every month, or in some cases 2-3 times a month, and relive those traumatic experiences that they have. I don't know, Mary, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I don't think, yes, the forum, as I said, is representative of the diverse nature of victims and survivors, and I believe it still is, even though slightly reduced. We come with our lived experience. The appointment process, obviously, if Judith's term had been extended, and possibly I would argue should have been extended till there was an opportunity to hand over to a new commissioner. As Andrew said, it would have been replenished. We could have provided, the current forum members would have provided the experience of the forum. The appointment process of forum members is robust. It means that you look at your own emotional intelligence. Everybody, every victim and survivor goes through various stages of grief and bereavement and pain, and that's not time bound. And it is that emotional intelligence of the forum and forum members that allow us to be able to go back and sit in a room and agree from all backgrounds and from all, as I say, diverse communities. So yeah, the commissioner, it is really, really important that there's a commissioner there to replenish it, so we can continue to work, to do the good work that we're doing, to work towards achieving the greatest degree of resolution possible, and ensure that we all move forward as a society and we empower victims and survivors.
Katy, do you want to come in there?
I was just going to say it may be worth considering too that we have, and thank you for the question, Porrick, but we have also undergone an evaluation of the forum and how we will move forward as soon as we can do. But as Andrew said on a number of occasions, the process is so tied up into what the statutory duties of the Commissioner are, as opposed to what we as a Commissioner are able to do. That can be the frustration for us.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to just check if Emma has any questions. I know that maybe with her connections earlier, she may not have been able to raise the hand. So we'll just check with you, Emma, if you've any questions.
Thanks, Chair. I've just turned my camera back on because I'm breaking up in and out through this due to my connection. No, I don't have any questions. I would, I suppose, follow on from what my colleagues had said, and obviously revelations over the past number of days about stated intention to review Human Rights Act in light of the British government amnesty proposals are cause for concern for us all, and I would echo the sentiments from others in relation to that. But no, thanks for the presentation and the answers thus far.
Thanks for that, Emma. Can I ask them for Diane Dodds then for some questions, please?
Yes, thank you. First of all, apologies, Chair. I was a little bit late getting to the meeting because the Education Committee meeting overran by about an hour and a half, and I was just running between two things. And thank you to everyone for the presentation. I did actually hear most of it. So a couple of just observations just at the start, and it wouldn't be unexpected that I would say this, but I know that you've been very careful to stick to the legal definition of a victim within the population survey, but it is still an issue, and I meet and talk to victims on a very, very frequent and regular basis, and it still is an issue that that definition doesn't excludes those who were victim makers, and should exclude those who were victim makers and apply solely to those who are innocent victims. And that is just an observation, not anything that you can do anything about today. So, but I do want to make sure, because I think that is really important. I thought that the survey was a really interesting piece of work, and I looked at the question 4. So do you support the establishment of any of the following? And 70% of people were absolutely against a statute of limitations. Now, last week in the House, I brought forward a motion around this, and the Assembly has already spoken on this previously. And this is one of the rare occasions where all 5 major parties in the Assembly actually do speak with one voice against the statute of limitations. I also met last week with the Speaker of the House of Lords, who was talking about reconstituting an informal interparliamentary group, which I think would be really useful, because I do wonder how much politicians actually follow what the Northern Ireland Assembly say if you're in the Lords or the Commons and, you're busy with your affairs in Newcastle or Sunderland or wherever it is. I made him aware that this is something that these legacy proposals would be opposed by all parties in the Assembly. And that this is something that should be reflected at Westminster. I know our MPs will, of course, be reflecting that, but just to set that out on the agenda, I think it's also important to try to disseminate that piece of information as far as possible. I am not, and again, that's an observation, and I will get to a question, Chair, just hold on a minute. I really am, sort of bemused and annoyed, I think, by the fact that Sinn Féin still think that the legacy proposals are about covering up just what state forces did, because 90% of all the deaths in Northern Ireland were done and created and inflicted such pain and misery by terrorist organisations like the Provisional IRA and the assorted groups of loyalist paramilitaries. And I think that is also worth putting on the record on a meeting like What contact have you had with the Secretary of State, particularly Mary? Thank you for speaking with such grace and dignity today. But what contact have you had with the Secretary of State and even Conor Burns around the legacy proposals that he has made?
Andrew could probably tell you the dates and times, but we have met with Brandon Lewis, the Secretary of State. We've also met with the Shadow Secretary of State. I don't recall, I haven't met with Conor Burns.
We've had no,
Sorry, Andrew?
We've had no contact with Conor Burns whatsoever.
I didn't think so. The forum, as I keep saying, we are the most diverse representative forum for victims and survivors, and we will meet with anybody that is willing to speak with us. I know we struggled to get a meeting with the Secretary of State. We had a meeting. I could say it probably wasn't as productive as we would have hoped from a forum's point of view. And we have asked, I think, and Andrew again will keep me right, but the forum asked for regular meetings with the Secretary of State, because I think it's very important that the forum actually meets with the Secretary of State, Conor Burns, and whoever else is involved in Northern Ireland issues in the United Kingdom Parliament. It's important they listen. I mean, it's important for the Assembly to listen as well. It's not just because a lot of the issues will have to be dealt with by the Assembly, and the Assembly needs to listen. And we've spoken about working in silos and collaborative approaches. You know, infrastructure doesn't happen without health, or health doesn't happen without finance, or, you know, so the departments have to work together, and there has to be a victim-focused policy, a bit like rural proofing. There has to be victim proofing of all policy development. And the only way you can do that is listen to victims.
Can I just probe that a little bit further? Why was the meeting with the Secretary of State unproductive?
It appeared that he had other things on his mind when we were speaking with him, and we all understand he is a busy person, as all politicians are. But I think regular meetings would probably educate him and other politicians much better if there was regular meetings with the forum and listening to people with lived experiences.
I mean, I must say I am disappointed by that. I do think that if you're going to take such radical steps in terms of legislation, then those radical steps, again, as you say, must be victim-proofed. In other words, you know, what is the view of victims, innocent victims around this? So, I mean, I think that's enlightening and disappointing, and will enlighten all colleagues in the room here as to how this process actually got to where it is, which is very, very disappointing. Can I move on and ask you, I seem to have heard for years, maybe I've just been around too long, but I seem to have heard for years about the Regional Trauma Service for Victims. What is it that's holding it up? Andrew has given us sort of things of where it is now. Why have we spent so long? I mean, I think one of the great shames, and yesterday we heard of a great shame in our society, the treatment of mothers and babies in homes throughout the years. The other great shame in Northern Ireland is the actual treatment of victims, where we left people to get on with their lives with very little help or advice or anything else. Why have we spent so long talking about a regional trauma service for victims and not delivering it? What are the issues that this committee can do to push that along?
I think in terms of what can the committee do to push it along is to ask the health minister to make the decision to get the regional trauma network up and running. It requires that decision around how long it will be a dedicated service for victims and survivors and the referral pathways into it. And if those two issues, I believe, were resolved quickly, we could move to a situation where the regional trauma network could at least be established and start to work. I have to say that within the health service, staff have been appointed to the regional trauma network, albeit that COVID came along and those staff got redeployed into COVID work, which we do understand. Yeah. But staff have actually been engaged to carry out this work, and it just needs to be that final push to get it established and open for victims and survivors. Katy, do you want to come in there?
I was just going to add, if I may, to go back to the original point that both Andrew and I made, which is that need and desire from the Commission to have departmental champions. Because without those dedicated people within there, as we mentioned previously, we need a shortcut and an opportunity to raise specific areas that particular departments have an understanding and a commitment to. And that, I can't reiterate enough how important that would be for us, just like the race equality champions, just like the rural proofing, for a category of people who are not protected under particular legislation, unlike others.
So, Katy, do you see those as people, with the officials within the department whose job would be to look at policies and to champion those in terms of victims across the range of government departments?
Absolutely. It's been very successful, and there are some very, very good ones in the race equality who have looked after the development of the race equality strategy. We see this as being absolutely essential to furthering the work in a more productive and providing more value for money, which will enable us to develop outcomes-based accountability across government, and then we can then start to apply it in local as well as regional.
It is interesting that in question 6, the answers to that the vast majority of people, either those who were directly impacted or those who were as a subsidiary impact, thought that health was the most important issue, health and emotional well-being.
Thank you for picking up on that. And I think that it also goes back to the question that we were talking about earlier in terms of who requires that support, I suppose. And so if we look at those who were professionals, first responders, we look at those who are immediate relatives, we look at those who were displaced and had to leave spaces for a variety of different reasons. These were all absolutely key and core, yet we seem to focus on second and third generation. And I think there's something that we need to do to work a little bit more in terms of understanding what the needs of those who haven't yet been accessing services and the reasons why, and if that's where they need to be, then we need to be able to provide for them better than we did when the tragedies occurred.
Okay. Can I say thank you? It really, really interesting, and thank you for the work you do, and thank you, Mary, for the championing.
Okay, thank you, Diane. I suppose we should just clarify, if you were an hour and a half overrun in the Education Committee, can I just ask, was that because you got a lunchtime detention for misbehaving in that committee, or? But I think we welcome you here anyway.
I never get a lunchtime detention, but the Education Committee went on to almost 2 o'clock. And then we had another thing that I had to do. It's just one of those days that I understand. But I didn't miss this because it is so important.
Well, listen, we appreciate that and the contributions. And as that's the end of the questions, can I take the opportunity to thank Andrew and to thank Mary and to thank Katy for your contributions here today. There, I'm sure, will be a number of actions that we'll take on the back of our conversations with you, but we certainly appreciate hearing from you firsthand exactly the issues that you're facing and the work that you're doing. So thank you very much for that, and we'll let you head on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, committee members. And just one final thing is we would like to extend an invitation to the committee members to come along and maybe hold a committee meeting out of Stormont when we maybe get out of this COVID or Zoom or whatever it's called these days, times, and come along and actually meet the forum as well.
Okay, well, certainly thank you very much indeed for that. We'll note that, and once we can get out and about and on the road again, we'll get a visit to yourselves, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
And if we can then just swap around then the presenters for the members, and maybe just to ask if there are any follow-ups that maybe members would have. I think we have a couple of actions that were taken out of there, maybe writing to the Health Minister about the regional trauma service would be one action, and then maybe just asking for a timetable from the department in terms of the appointment of the Commissioner, just to keep that gentle bit of supportive pressure to get that process undertaken. Is there any other follow-ups?
Sorry.
Yes, go
Colin,
ahead.
can I suggest... Sorry, you go ahead, Pat. I don't know who's speaking.
Okay, well, you go on ahead, Diane.
Right, can I suggest we also write to FM and DFM around the issue that Katy brought up of departmental champions for victims? I mean, there are departmental champions for all kinds of things within departments. I mean, I can name you for women, for, all sorts of things. But I mean, I never, in the Department for the Economy, came across anyone who looked at things through the lens of a victim.
Okay, well, we could ask if that is something that is considered or envisaged, and then based on the response, we could gauge from there. Pat, were you looking to come in there?
Yeah, yes, Chair. Sorry, Diane, for cutting across you there. My apology. No, I just wanted to say, I mean, there should be a clear message go out from the committee today, especially in the light of the comments from Conor Burns this morning, that we object and oppose and challenge the amnesty proposals that this British government is intending to bring forward. I think it's important that the committee speaks with one voice on that issue.
Well,
absolutely,
and I think we've all parties have rejected that, and I think that all parties would agree that within Stormont House Agreement there is the majority view on the majority of issues. There might be some issues that need ironed out from that, but I don't think that we need to be going back to the drawing board like they have and then come up with something that is totally unacceptable. So if we can get a clear message to Conor on that, it would be appreciated. Okay, I'm not seeing or hearing from anybody else, so we maybe could make a move then on to the next item on the agenda. Next is item number 6, which is a written briefing from the Research and Information Service on civic engagement. It's on pages 80 to 98 of the meeting pack. We commissioned this research on the models of participatory policy making with examples from elsewhere compared and contrasted with the Civic Forum. Is there any aspects of the briefing that members wish to raise? Okay, then if we are content, can that written briefing be noted? Okay. Then item 7 is scrutiny of an arm's length bodies. This week it is the Community Relations Council. It's on pages 100 to 118 of the meeting pack. We had agreed that we would invite written briefings from the various arm's length bodies in lieu of oral briefings. Is there any aspect of the report that is tabled today that anybody would like to raise? Okay, then we can note that we are content with that and move to item 8, which is the Forward Work Programme. If members can bear with me just a little bit in this one. On page 120 of the meeting pack is the Forward Work Programme for October. Members, we have the attendance by the Senate Special Select Committee on the withdrawal of the UK from the EU on the 20th of October. This will be in the Senate chamber. Due to space limitations, could I ask that people please inform the clerk if you wish to attend in person or virtually so that the maximum number of senators can be accommodated? It's my understanding that there are 7 along with 2 officials that wish to attend, so that's why we've opted for the Senate chamber, which is a bit bigger, but I don't think it's going to accommodate all of us. So if we could just clarify in advance those that will join us virtually so that we can make sure that we have the right number of spaces. We are also waiting on confirmation for the attendance of the head of the civil service on the 3rd of November, but we're certainly hopeful and positive that we'll get that presentation made on that date. And also then we have the stakeholder event that we agreed earlier will be on the 10th of November, which will also be the same day that the new Permanent Secretary, Dennis McMahon, will attend the committee to give us an introductory briefing as well. So there is quite a busy period of time ahead with a couple of double presentation days. So there may be an opportunity to get more scrutiny done, but I also may need to just curtail some of the inputs if we're going to have double briefings on the one day. But are members happy enough to note the forward work programme?
Yep.
Okay. Then item 9 is the correspondence. There are 6 items of correspondence on pages 125 to 150 of the meeting pack. On pages 148 and 49 is correspondence from the Human Rights Commission referring to the Commission's strategic planning process for 22 to 25. I would maybe like just on the basis of that being given to us today, just to thank the outgoing Chief Commissioner Les Allenby for his engagement with the committee and to wish Alison Kilpatrick well in her role as the new Chief Commissioner. I know that as part of the Brexit process we had the Human Rights Commission up a number of times and it was always good to hear from Les exactly what was happening within their realm, and he was always up for coming up to meet the committee, so I want to thank him for that and his work in the past, and then I'm sure Alison will likewise be available and helpful to us. So it was just to note that. And also that the correspondence that we have from the Office of Commissioner for Public Appointments, there hasn't been a commissioner in place since April. Can I maybe suggest that we write to the department and just ask for an update in that process, because there may be a number of further positions that are empty that may not be getting filled because that position isn't filled. So it's really key that that's done as quickly as possible. Are members happy enough for that letter to go?
Yep.
And then are you content to note the remainder of the correspondence?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Item number 10 is any other business. Any other business from any member? Okay, then on that basis, we can conclude the meeting for today. Our next meeting is at 2 o'clock next week on Wednesday, the 13th of October, here and virtually. Members, thank you very much for your engagement today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, goodbye.
Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly